All right, good morning, everybody. It's 11:30. We'll go ahead and get started with the pre-commission agenda. For the president's report, I'm first going to hand it over to Commissioner Nielsen for a couple of words.
Yeah, thank you, President Gold. It's been a pretty rough week, both in Texas and close to home with the fatality on Nez Perce last week. And I don't know, in my 35 plus years working for the public, you're always deeply affected by that, particularly when it's in your sphere of responsibility. And I just want to say, this is why we do what we do. This is why we budget for in the community programs constantly. We've done that in this particular neighborhood. And I just want to, you can get discouraged pretty easily when these events happen. But I just want to remind the staff and my fellow commission members that with what we do and the standards that we've adopted and improved over the years, while we may know the fatalities, we'll never know how many lives we've saved. So I just want to say we will keep that focus. Safety, it's in everything we do. Personally, as a planner in my career, it's how I see the world. It's kind of interesting to go on a car or bike ride or walk with me because you can't turn it off. But I just want to say, and I appreciate chatting with the director, some responses to that so that we can make that neighborhood a little better. There is a candlelight vigil Friday night at Whitney starting at 9. So if people would like to participate in that, you just show up. So thank you, Madam President.
Thanks, Commissioner Nielsen. Commissioner Goldberg.
I must say about that same incident, I was disturbed enough by it that I drove around the area. And one of the things that popped into my mind faster than anything else was that there was a serious difference in the traffic, the safety treatments and everything else. A pretty serious difference between that area and one just a couple of blocks away next to the country club. And so, crudely put, but it was kind of like the difference between the haves and the have-nots. And I would hope that very soon we would be able to make it much easier for kids to cross the streets in that area. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Nielsen, Commissioner Goldthorpe. As Commissioner Nielsen indicated, Director Head and the team have already been assessing for opportunities, and I'm sure the commission will be updated as that moves forward. But yeah, always, these tragedies are always impactful in the community, and we just really appreciate sharing your perspective. I'm going to move on to a little bit different topic. I just want to commend the team and thank everybody involved in the Walk, Bike, and Ride effort, because they organized a really great group bike ride from Catalpa Park to Sunset Park. And there were about 30 people that turned out for that, and they had to split it into 3 different groups. And Tom Laws led my group, and everybody did such a great job. It was a super hot day, and with the breaks and keeping it in shaded areas and lots of ice water on hand, and everybody was able to enjoy themselves and learn a lot about the neighborhood and see a new pathway and bike counter. And I just thought it was a great experience overall. So I just want to commend the team on that.
Madam President.
Commissioner Pickering.
I also want to commend, sorry if I interrupted you, but I want to commend our team for responding to that brush fire as well. As a wildland firefighter, it warmed my heart deeply to see our folks working quickly in action. I even got messages from folks all the way in Elmore County who were just like, "What? Your team does this?" I'm like, "Yep, they're the best team ever." So just want to say thank you to the quick actions of that crew, and I think it's a huge demonstration of our spirit to just get things done and solve the challenges when they're before us, right? Even if we're not the ideal partner. We just roll up our sleeves and get our hands dirty and solve it. So huge kudos to that team and the leadership of the organization to fostering that culture.
You probably stole some of Director Head's thunder in his director's report there, but yes, totally agree with your comments there. So I'll move on to general housekeeping and discussion of the agenda. Is there anything from the commission? Okay, seeing none, over to you, Director Head, for the director's report.
I'm not going to say I'm sorry. So
Madam President, Commission, absolutely not. I wouldn't want you to. And just from a housekeeping perspective, after the meeting, our work session will be down here on the floor. This will be an extended conversation. We really need your some direction as we are preparing the final to go into the final legs of the CIP. And so we look forward to that discussion today. I appreciate the comments of Commissioner Nilsson. We too, as staff, feel, as mentioned, we feel every time there's a fatality, but it feels even more when it's a child. And so that definitely is, the team has been out there multiple times looking at options. We are looking at some striping there to really delineate that, some temporary bulb outs in front of the school, and some additional signage and markings there. So that just all an effort to do what we can today in anticipation of a project that has already gone through a concept design in the future. So we're grateful for the opportunity and the support of the commission to make those little adjustments that can make a difference and save lives. We're grateful today for the team and for the opportunity to share some of the great work, including some things already discussed. Wanted to highlight, oh please. I just want to share briefly that Bob got me up there singing last week at our annual barbecue. And we can end the song at any point. I'd really appreciate that. So our good Bob Parsley was there to sing and serenade us. We had over 200 team members and family members show up. It was just a great time on a very hot day in the park, but a great time last week to celebrate. And so true confession, not every slide in my director's report is always prepared by me, and I would not have put that in the presentation. Thank you, Shandy. But it was a great day. Commission, as we prepare for the budget, wanted to give you an update on some of the benefits, the adjustments and changes that we're looking at this year. As we've looked at, first of all, let's talk about our medical program, our medical insurance program. Over the last 3 years, we've had an increase of about 23% in our premium cost. This year, we were looking at, we started at a 9.8%. We got that negotiated down to 7%. But unfortunately, this is a huge impact, and we can't continue to absorb these things. And so we're looking, we dove deeply as an executive team into what are the options and how do we handle these changes and how do we address this for the team and make it reasonable. We looked at other agencies around us and how do we compare from what we offer. I'll say we've always had a very, what they say, rich plan that provided great benefits to the team. But we do think that it is time that we do need to make some minor adjustments this year. Overall, from the dental and other insurance, our life insurance and other things, we have a minor cost adjustment of $34,000. When it comes to the medical program, currently we have a $200 deductible and $1,200 out of pocket max per person. So for a family, that's $400, and $2,400 max for a family. Most agencies around us that we see are about a $500 deductible. Most public agencies are looking at that. We think that it's time to just, at this point, make a minor change to a $250 deductible, so $50 change per person and a $15 max out of pocket, which equates to about a $700 difference for a family for a year, or $350 for an individual. We have a way that I'll share with you how we can address this for the team that we think is a great way to soften that blow and make sure that they still have the care, but they also have the choice of how to provide for that. We also, with this, that gets us down to below a 6% increase. We do have a reserve that has built up with our insurance company over time that we could use, and we are proposing to buy that down to actually a -1%. So our premium would be able to decrease slightly just in managing these costs for the highway district. So overall, that would not need to be budgeted with new money next year, and would be a savings of almost $870,000. So
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yeah, a quick, because of that buy down or using the reserves, what would be the net effect if we didn't change a thing and still use the reserves to offset that increase?
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, it would be about that $118,000. But let me go to the next portion, because let me share with you what we're proposing to do. Currently, for the individual on our medical plan, they pay just under $60 a month for themselves. We are proposing to absorb the cost for the employee for their premium. That's pretty much in line with a lot of our partners. It's a lot of our competition, and to be able to say to an employee that we cover the cost of your medical insurance is a big deal. It has a big deal. What that would do is that would put $60 pre-tax, right? They still would be taxed about $60 back into their pockets, which equates to roughly around $700 a year. So if they don't need the medical care, that's more money in their pockets. If they do need it, we're giving that money back to them that they could then meet that need. And so that's how we think this is an appropriate shift in the program. It's an option. If the commission doesn't agree, we'll do whatever you tell us to. But we do believe that making that shift for our team members and taking that on, then they still would have to contribute for a spouse or family, but they wouldn't have to contribute for themselves for that deductible. And we think that that's a big difference. While the cost is a little bit more than we're saving, we do think that putting more money into their pockets matters, and we hear that. But we hear often, while benefits are fantastic, having more money in our pockets really matters, and it's how we are able to pay for things. And so that's the way we're proposing to handle that. Give them the money in cash so that they can cover that cost where they may have that slight increase on their medical side. But happy to take any thoughts on that front. Okay. Madam President, the other thing that we've been looking at is the impact to our team when it comes to our Percy matching program. This is such a wonderful program that we've been able to add for the team. Currently, we match at 2%, those who choose to enroll in the program in our 401k program. And then in the last, we call it rule of 80, but the last 5 years before retirement, we're matching at 4%. We're looking at making a little shift to that, again, to be in alignment with a lot of our partners, where we would move that to 10 years before retirement. So that allows people to build up enough savings to help cover the medical cost between retirement and when they can qualify for Medicare. as well as giving a little bit more once employees reach that 10-year mark, and moving that to a 3% just to reward for that longevity. These are programs that we really are looking at, again, encouraging people to stay with the district to meet those benefits. Overall, the net savings to the highway district is about $400,000. And so we think that this is a positive thing that we can both meet the needs of our team as well as help manage the cost of our benefits program. So these would be incorporated into the budget, by the way. And we will have a copy of the draft budget available for you after this meeting. So you can prepare for next week's work session for review. We recently had a wonderful event in Northwest Meridian, West Ada County area. This was entitled Cone Zone. We shared with you in anticipation of this, but had over 200 attendees. Shandy disappeared. Okay, 200. Maybe I was thinking maybe you ran and hid after putting that video up there. Over 200 attendees who came out to learn about all the construction projects happening in that area. ACHD projects, ITD projects, our NAMPA projects, and Meridian sewer projects. So it was a very positive event. Thank you to our communications team who worked extremely hard on getting that set up in a short time. But then also all the team members who were there from all over ACHD to help share good, exciting things that happen in our community and helping them inform what ACHD does. Brief update on our Apple construction site. Progress is being made. The road is new through the site. That's been completed with all the appropriate utilities under there. Work continues underground to get all the drainage and stormwater and facilities prep and foundations prepped. We anticipate being able to go vertical in the near future. I would highlight this picture is really interesting. If you look just above our site at Micron and all the cranes that are there and how much work is happening there as well, and the impact that will have in the community moving forward. So now let's talk about some of our heroes, and I'd like to invite Casey and Travis up for just a second. Come forward. I know this is not what you want us to do, but we're doing it anyway. This wonderful team was driving one of our drainage vehicles that are always loaded with water down Highway 69 and noticed just a small plume of smoke. By the time they got turned around, it had grown pretty substantially. They called the fire department, were able to start using the water there, and by the time the fire department showed up, the fire was out. The department said with the rate that it was moving, with the heat that was there, that fire would have taken off quickly. This is right next to Lineman College, and could really have had a pretty significant impact. So in recognition of their efforts, we do have a director's coin for them, as well as we are going to give them a day's paid time off just in gratitude for their quick service and their efforts to get this done. So we continue to make wonderful progress on our chip seal. We were off last week for the 4th of July, getting vehicles cleaned up and ready to go for the rest of the season. We're at 152 miles. That's roughly 50% of the miles chipped. We're about 25% in on our fog sealing and paint. So we're making great progress this year. Let's share another incident that happened yesterday that we're so grateful for the team and the professionalism and the way that they take this on. Earlier this week, our vehicles loaded up with oil and headed out to work on chip sealing. our wonderful distributor operator with the keen eye was able to recognize that the oil was not sitting right. Something was going on. We had done a mile of road at that time. So they caught it very, very quickly. The oil was running a little bit more than it should have. And come to find out, the company that provides our oil had made an error in their mix. So it did stop the work for the day. They were able to get things shut off, get that cleaned up, get the right oil. So we lost a day in that, but it speaks to the quality of employees that we have and the value that they bring. Imagine had we gone a full day without noticing, right? We do believe that road will eventually set up in a way that we won't need to do something. If we do, we may have to go back and scrape it off and redo the chip there with the right oil. But we do think that I just want to give kudos to the team who's paying such great attention all the time and making sure that the investments we're making for the public are the right investments. So kudos to the team for that. Just a couple of things that are up and coming. As noted, we are going in heavily into budget season here. We have our Neighborhoods in the Know event scheduled for the 24th of this month, which will be also our budget open house. With the hearing coming up on the 27th of August, you'll have those packets for you today, and we'll go over them in detail next week. We continue to have great walk, bike, ride events put on by our Commuteride team in the Collister neighborhood. There's another one coming up on the 15th. On the 22nd, we will be having a commemorative event at Washington and 16th. This is the safety project that was completed there. We've been in good coordination with the family and identified a good opportunity to move forward with an event there, just to recognize the work that has been done and just remember a little bit of the reason why that occurred. Stop on Red Week starts at the beginning of August. We're excited for that. And then we have a couple tours with our community of the Traffic Operations Center. So we're excited to continue to share that wonderful building. With all the tours we've done, everyone's been extremely impressed. We had a great tour with Mayor Chadwick recently. He was the only one of our mayors that made it out there, but seeing behind the scenes was very good for him, and he commented on that and how much it affected his view of what all that ACHD does for the community. So pretty exciting there. With that, commissioners, I'll stand for any questions.
Commissioner Nielsen?
As a ULI member, they do tend to have after hours, but that's 9 a.m., not 9 p.m.
Correct.
Okay.
PM.
I said PM.
Oh, I
And then
apologize.
it's okay.
Apologize.
And then I'm just curious on the 24th, the neighborhood and budget open house. So I've
Mhm.
gone to in the past for the neighborhood association reps, but what's the format for the budget open house? Is that just for neighborhoods or is that for the public as well?
Madam President, Commissioner Nielsen, our budget open houses are not necessarily the most heavily attended activities. We've had years where we've had maybe one person show up. And so one of the things we did over the last year is combine them with the Neighborhood in the Know, because the general feeling is that the neighborhoods are the most invested in seeing what we're doing. And so we share our presentation as part of that. It is open to the public who want to attend there, but we set it up in a way that we're getting that information out more broadly about what ACHD is planning to do.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Director.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we are going to be at ease for 6 minutes till 12 o'clock. All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's now 12 o'clock. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Thanks, everyone who's joining us in person and online, and please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the first item is to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless noted. We do have a request to remand number 5 back to staff until next week. So given that, is there a motion to approve the agenda minus number 5?
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as published with the exception of item number 5, which is remanded to staff.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that moves us to the regular agenda. First up, we've got Resolution 2444, Transfer of Property, Request for Adoption, and this is a public hearing, which I will go ahead and open and turn it over to you, Joe.
Good afternoon. For the record, Joe Schoen, Fleet Manager. Thank you, Commission. Today we will be discussing the public hearing for 3 separate resolutions, starting with the first one of 2444. I think I got the right number of 4s. On this, I do want to clarify that there is a clerical error on the agenda. It is for 3 Sanders. So in this one, it's a notice to transfer property to Nampa Highway District 1 for 3 12-foot dump truck Sanders. These units have already been replaced. The salvage value on all these, we've estimated at $3,000 for all 3 total. For comparison, the auction results for one that sold here a month or so ago sold for $1,050. So staff recommends that the commission approves the resolution 2444, surplus property, and approve the transfer to Nampa Highway District. With that one, I'll stand for any questions.
Are there any questions for Joe? Okay, seeing none, is there anybody signed up to testify on this? No? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Is there a motion on this?
Yes. Chairman, I
Commissioner Goldthorpe?
move that we approve Resolution 2444, which is the property transfer.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2 on the regular agenda is Resolution 2445, Transfer of Property, Request for Adoption. This is also a public hearing, which I'll go ahead and open. Over to you, Joe.
So thank you. Another clarifying point on this with the agenda, it is for 1 patch truck, a 2009 International patch truck, and 1 2007 Volvo water truck. So in this, both have been replaced. They were declared surplus. For comparison, on the water truck, for the price that we're getting, I think I'd have to double check. I think it's $13,000. For comparison, same series Volvo truck was ones that 2 of them I had to bring to commission because they did not hit the estimated salvage value from auction this year. So same series truck, I think it's a very fair price with it if there was any questions on that. So in this, approve that we transfer the personal property to Boise County. And I'll stand for any questions on this one.
Any questions?
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney?
Joe, just quickly on the trucks you mentioned that we had some that we put to auction recently. What did we ultimately get for those?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, for the water truck, it was a newer water truck that went for comparison on a water truck. I think that was just over 25,000. For the Volvo dump trucks, which this is the same chassis as those dump trucks, I believe they were 20,000 and 28,000.
Okay, so these costs are roughly comparable, or
Yeah.
these prices are?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have anybody signed up to testify on this one? No. All right, well then I will close the public hearing on this one. Is there a motion?
Yes,
Commissioner
I
Goldberg?
would move that we adopt resolution 2445, another transfer of property.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item number 3 is resolution 2446, transfer of property, request for adoption, also a public hearing, which I'll open. And back over to you, Joe.
Thank you again. So this one is for transfer of property to ITD. It is a 2017 paver. This paver is a very large paver. As we've done our continual efforts to right-size the fleet as operations is adjusted in their scope and work performed, it is our recommendation that we do transfer this paver. It still has great residual value given the low hours that are on it. And in a couple weeks, I would be coming before you for the replacement of this paver. So some of the feedback and struggles that we've had with this paver, maneuverability is a big one. It is a large paver. It is made for large production paving projects. As we look at the scope, it's no longer really aligned with the types of projects that we do, whether it's in residential, some of the rural overlays that we do, and a lot of the patchwork that we do. From a fleet perspective, we're seeing costs rise due to age. One of the worst things that we can have in a piece of equipment is one that doesn't get utilized that often. So with 970 hours, this is extremely low hours for the 8 rough years that it's been in the fleet. So with that, I would recommend that we declare it surplus and transfer it to Idaho Transportation Department. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions on this? Commissioner Nielsen?
I do, Joe. So they're going to take delivery here and take that all the way up to District 1? Is that what I'm understanding?
President Gold, Commissioner Nelson, yes.
Wow, okay. Maybe they need to do a traffic alert when that's heading up a highway there.
I believe they
Thank
will.
you.
Any other questions?
President?
Commissioner McKinney?
Joe, I think before the meeting, I chatted briefly with the director and Justin, and we talked about this particular item. And I asked them a couple questions, and I think their answers would be good information for everyone to have. My questions were, how much did we pay for this to begin with? And how long have we been using it? And then what's it likely going to cost to get the right size one? And I think that's helpful information. Could you touch on those for a moment?
Yep. President Gold, Commissioner McKinney, yes, original purchase price in 2017 was just over $362,000. ITD is willing to pay $250,000 for the paver today. With 970-ish hours, I believe that is a very fair price on both sides. The planned replacement to right size this is right around $307,000. So roughly $57,000 difference between what we're recuperating here and a purchase of a new paver.
And so the current one, we've gotten, 900 and some odd hours of use of it over, 2017. So it's about 7 years. 8 years it's been in use. And what's the lifespan if we purchase a new one? We're going to be spending another 60,000 or so beyond what we're getting for this one, but what'll be its lifespan likely?
President Gold, Commissioner McKinney, I believe that the lifespan would be 10 to 15 years on the new paver.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. I think, my thoughts on this one, it seems like, this is a pretty good deal, and we're going to end up with good equipment that will have a good long life, and selling off what we've got to the right buyer at a decent price, it sounds like. So I think this sounds like a good deal.
Any other questions? Do we have anybody signed up on this one? Okay, I will close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
Madam President,
Commissioner Pickering?
I move to approve resolution 2446, transfer of property as staff recommended and presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion in 2 seconds. Is there any other discussion? Okay, Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
That moves us to discussion items and public communications. Do we have anybody in person or online signed up to speak to the commission?
I don't see that Steve is here. Okay.
Okay.
You're good.
All right, seeing none, the meeting is adjourned. That moves us to a post-commission agenda. We've got a work session for impact fee capital improvement plan update, preliminary analysis summary, and we are going to do this work session down on the floor. So, okay, 5-minute break.
plan that can be brought forward and reviewed by you. We do need to have some indication whether you'd like to move forward with how we've done the plan historically over the last several cycles, which is a single service area, or whether you'd like to pursue one of the other service area options. You're not voting on this today, but it's one of those things where it's kind of an interim step as we prepare the plan. We need to know which direction to head. Just as a reminder, this plan is an ordinance. Ultimately, it's associated with an ordinance and requires 4 votes for passage. So just keeping that in mind as you have your deliberations and discussions, that will could be something to consider as you move forward. So big day. We're going to be here to answer as many questions as you have. This could take a little while. We want to make sure you have all the information we provided to the CICAC. We've been having partnership meetings with city staff. The director and I have been meeting with mayors to discuss the project. You know, projects like this is when they go for such a long time, you know, it just takes, they get some momentum behind it, but sometimes people forget we're working on it. So here we are today, hoping to get set before we move into essentially the final phase, which is the preparation of the plan and the bringing forward to you the ordinance and associated CIP for your adoption. And our goal is to do that certainly by the end of this year. So that's where we're at today. I'm glad to answer any questions, but with that, we have Kittleson here to provide the next steps in the discussion.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Justin. Thank you, commissioners, for having us back here today. As Justin mentioned, we have a lot of information to go through, so I'll apologize in advance for the length of this presentation. But we're really at some of the key pivotal moments in this project where we have a lot of data and information to share. And as Justin said, some points to get some good direction from you today. So start with just an overview of the presentation, what we'll be covering today. I'll also say Sonia Delighten with Kittleson and Associates. Sorry, didn't introduce myself. Also have Mark Heisinger with Kittleson here with me today as well. We'll start the presentation with just a reminder of the process that we've been going through overall for the CIP and traffic impact fee updates. We'll revisit the full roadway project list that we discussed with you last time we were with you at a work session just about a month and a half ago. We'll dive into the project cost estimates that have now been developed for all those projects. And then go into a discussion about the refinement of the CIP projects that we've gone through. We'll talk about how we have now developed the traffic impact fee calculations. And then we'll get into the 2 key elements that we're hoping for direction on today, which is the scenarios for the service areas, as well as the scenarios for adjustments to impact the range of impact fee eligibility. And then we'll talk about next steps. So as a reminder, this is the process we've been going through as part of the CIP update. We started the process with a best practice review focused on 4 key topic areas, those being service area, range of projects or range of impact fee eligibility, collector roadways, and then analysis time period. From there, we moved into the project development for developing what projects could be part of the CIP. And recently, we've been hitting on the project costs, developing project costs for the full CIP projects, and going into the development of traffic impact fees. Particularly looking at scenarios for service area and range of impact fee eligibility. And the last step we'll be going through is developing the resultant 2025 CIP and traffic impact fee schedule, pending your direction on what we talk about today. So as a reminder, this graphic, and I believe you do have it in front of you as well, is the full full list of CIP roadway projects. So these were all the projects that were identified, additional capacity projects that were identified as needed to serve future growth between 2025 and 2045. These exclude any needs that were identified as existing deficiencies. And overall, there were 149 individual roadway segment projects in this draft list, which was about 13 additional projects above and beyond your currently adopted CIP. So we presented this in detail last session. I will say this list has now gone through an update pending your comments from last time, as well as additional CICAC input we had with your advisory committee as well.
Can you get your mic?
How many were quarter preservation versus roadways? I mean, did those numbers go up in quarter preservation or just increase? Yeah.
President Gold, Commissioner, great question. And our next slides are getting right to that. So thank you for the excellent segue. So yeah, and we'll get there in just a few slides. So after we had this full list, we then went through developing project costs for all of those projects. The process we used for developing cost estimates was consistent with the same process that has been done in previous CIP updates. The cost assumptions and the size of projects, extent of projects, were all based on current ACHD policy requirements, how much right-of-way is required for so many lanes and arterials, the roadway cross sections, what our intersections look like based on policy. And then the actual unit costs for both right-of-way and construction units were developed based on a detailed list we received from ACHD staff and your project estimators based on construction bids you have received as a district within about the last 4 years. So it's really the latest and best information we have available. It went through quite a bit of refinement, making sure it was as up to date as possible. And it's probably not a surprise to you because you see projects come through your agenda frequently. Cost estimates have gone up a lot in that time period. So we weren't surprised to see those adjustments that were needed. And then we also, because this plan has a 20-year horizon, we also had to identify current and projected inflation rates. We know the cost we would be paying today for a project is not what we'd be paying in 2035 or 2040, the lifespan of this plan. So we had to apply those inflation rates as well. So based on that work, these are the resultant project costs. So the total cost for all of those projects in that initial map, as well as intersection projects, would be about $2.9 billion. So this assumes no changes to any policy decisions compared to today. And it also does not assume any screening refinement based on corridor preservation or things like that, which we'll get to next. Of that approximately $2.9 billion, the impact fee eligible component of that, if we don't assume any policy changes, is about $1.9 billion. So that's if we apply sort of a consistent policy to what your current CIP has. So after we created that full project cost, we did then have to go through a refinement process. And this refinement process is necessary to truth test the CIP, if you will, to make sure what is in the document is feasible and realistic. First, ACHD staff completed a financial projection analysis and developed financial projections for the lifespan of the CIP. And this is critical because, as we just showed on the previous slide, not all components of the CIP projects are impact fee eligible. So if we have projects in the CIP, the district will need to fund that remaining portion of them. So we need to make sure that financial projections are there to be able to do that. Also, we know that CIP projects are not the only projects that the district has to provide over the next 20 years. You have a lot of maintenance projects as well as other types of projects that you need to implement. And so we need to make sure the financial projections are there to incorporate those as well. And then also, we refine the project list because we need to make sure that these projects can actually be implemented physically over the plan's horizon. So even assuming aggressive growth in ACHD's capacity to implement projects in the future, there are only so many projects ACHD can implement each year, can design and manage each year. There are only so many contractors available to actually go out and construct projects each year. And we also need to make sure that we're not causing excessive roadway closures, construction impacts throughout the district. So we need to screen and say, what is a realistic number of projects the district could implement over the course of this 20-year horizon? And so projects were screened from that standpoint as well. And so now finally answering your question, Commissioner Nielsen, sorry it took a while. This is the resultant draft, our proposed draft refined project list. And you will see here, no projects have been removed from the CIP list, but some projects, those shown in sort of the greeny blue, have been designated as right-of-way or corridor preservation only. And the remaining projects that are shown in the yellowy orange are projects that we would propose are in for not only right-of-way preservation, but also construction dollars. And how we went through this screening process, primarily we screened projects to move them to right-of-way preservation only for those projects that were in the 2040 and beyond timeframe. So those that were not shown as triggered needed capacity until 2040 or beyond. We also screened a few projects that would have very significant construction impacts. So you might remember there were a few projects shown as 7-lane widening on corridors that are already built out, like Fairview and Overland. So we screened those for right-of-way preservation only, as well as input from partner agencies. Edson and Megan have been meeting with all of the partner agency staff since our last meeting with you. Justin mentioned that they've also been meeting, he and Director Head have been meeting with mayors. And so partner agency staff had some input on projects that they wanted to make sure were kept in for construction or that maybe weren't their priorities for keeping in on construction. So we went through that process. Okay, so what does
Before we go on, I'm sorry,
yes,
can I just ask a
absolutely.
quick question on the project list and looking at impact fees and impact fee eligibility? Have we looked at the rate of impact fee generation and compared that to the rate of project expenditures going forward? I guess, does this make sense? Have we looked at what maintenance fees are coming in and are likely to come in over the projected period compared to then the total cost of all projects, impact fee eligible and otherwise, to make sure that time-wise it all matches up, if that makes sense. Does that question make sense to you?
Yeah, President Gold, Commissioner McKinney, absolutely. That process of looking at historical rates of fees coming in, projecting out future fees coming in, knowing that fees are not going to stay the same, they're likely going to increase to some extent. That was all part of that financial analysis that I described, that first step of screening and refinement work. Yes. Okay.
Madam President.
Oh,
Commissioner Pickering.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate this updated version. And I was wondering, since you had those conversations with cities and municipal partners, what's the plan to then looping back with them with this updated version?
Madam President, Commissioner Pickering. So we wanted to bring the draft, kind of this refined draft to you today to look at, make sure kind of you were feeling good about it. Staff's done a lot of work here. What would happen as a next step is we would then take this draft with these examples out in the draft plan so that the cities could see the whole picture at that point and then provide any further comments they may have. You know, projects that are designated right-of-way preservation only, that designation can be updated by the commission essentially at any time through a revised CIP process. So you could do an interim update where, let's say something happened and a project that was designated right-of-way preservation only suddenly became a higher priority for a community or for the commission. We could revise our CIP, update the construction list, and then add that project in for construction. So this doesn't really lock you down. It's just a way within the CIP to say, you know, these projects that are way out in the back end of the CIP or that, you know, have other variables that make them more unlikely to be constructed in the near future are really good candidates for right-of-way preservation only. And so I think through that final process of the draft plan, the cities will have a look at it. You can have a final look at it. And then once again, it can be changed if something major changes.
I think that makes sense. And I think we could obviously spend a lot of time just like hemming and hawing over this map too. But I think in terms of just moving the conversation forward as it relates to the topic today, I think this is really helpful and don't want to undersell like the importance of kind of airing this map, draft map, excuse me, back to those partner organizations. Cause I think we can kind of get so wrapped up in the bigger task at hand, right? Without kind of coming back and demonstrating like, we've listened, how close is this, right? And obviously we can continue to talk more, but I think just flagging that for staff would be good.
Thank you very much. I will highlight, we've been focused mainly on the roadway projects. I will highlight for you, we do still have a full list of intersection projects also included in the cost estimates. Because we know intersections tend to be the constraint points before roadways, because that's where you have traffic conflicting with each other directionally. We did keep all of the intersection projects in as full construction costs as part of these cost estimates. And so with refinement, the full project costs now look like this. So the total roadway project costs would be about 1.3 billion. The intersection project costs would be around 882 million. So a total project cost of about $2.2 billion. And again, assuming no policy changes yet at this point, that would translate to about $1.5 billion in impact fee eligible project costs. Okay. So our next step then was to translate these costs into impact fees. What does that look like? So this shows the formula as well as the key inputs in addition to project costs that go into your impact fee calculations. So these inputs that you see listed in the table, they come directly from the Compass Regional Travel Demand Model. Those are change in vehicle miles traveled. So compared to today in 2045, what is the change in vehicle miles traveled? Average trip length, as well as a network adjustment factor, which is essentially how much of the trips occur on ACHD roadways compared to other agency roadways. And in Ada County, that's ITD roadways. And so you can see in this table what the factors are today with our current model run compared to what they are in your currently adopted CIP. So we can see that the change in VMT over the 20-year horizon went up slightly. You can also see from the equation, though, that's a denominator in the equation, so that actually reduces your traffic impact fees. It basically spreads them out across more trips. Our average trip length went up slightly, and probably not surprising as development continues to go further out into the county. Trips get longer as people commute longer or travel longer distances to get to where they want to go. And then our network adjustment factor, the percent of the trips that occur on ACHD's network actually went down. And that is most likely explained that the model that we're using for 2045 incorporates some significant investment on ITD's system with projects that they currently have programmed on State Highway 44, 2026, and the State Highway 16 extension. Those are all assumed in the model now. They weren't in the previous CIP model. So that likely explains why slightly less trips are happening on ACHD's system, or slightly lower proportion of trips are happening on ACHD's system compared to ITD's. And so we take our project costs, those refined project costs from the previous slide, and apply this equation with these new updated 2025 factors. And that results in these following sample of impact fees. We don't have a full draft schedule for you, but we have some of the key most common impact fees here. So you can see on in the middle column, what would those impact fees be if we did not refine the project list, as we have recently spoken about, and then what they are with that refined list. So you can see with that refined list, and again, assuming no policy changes yet at this time, your single family home traffic impact fee would be just over $7,200. You can see what the office fee would be, around $11,000, and then, or per 1,000 square feet, that is, and then shopping center would be about $16,700 per 1,000 square feet. So I will say, while there are some changes to the factors that go into this impact fee calculation, some were increasing it slightly, like trip length, some were decreasing it, like the VMT. Really, the reason or the primary driver of these impact fees is the updated project costs. We have not, the CIP has not updated those project costs since approximately 2019, which are based on obviously costs going back to maybe even 2015. So we're looking at a pretty long period of time of construction costs and right-of-way costs increasing. So I would say that's your primary driver of these new impact fees.
Madam President.
Commissioner McKinney?
Sonia, just quickly, how do these impact fee amounts compare to current fees for those same types of properties?
Great question. Yeah, President Gold, Commissioner McKinney. So single family home today is $3,493 compared to the $7,268. I think you could say essentially doubling. Office per 1,000 square feet today is 5,350. And then shopping center per 1,000 square feet is 8,068 per 1,000 square feet compared to the 16,789.
And let me just ask then, how would these numbers change? You mentioned that the construction cost estimates, if I heard you correctly, construction cost estimates that we have here haven't been updated in a while. They're kind of old numbers.
Yeah.
How would these numbers be affected if we did update all of those with more accurate numbers?
President Gold, Commissioner McKinney, let me clarify. When I said they're based on old numbers, your currently adopted CIP. So those numbers I just compared to the 3,493 single family home compared to the 7,268. That 3,493 number, that's the one I said is based on construction numbers that were probably developed in that 2015 to 2019 time period.
Oh, okay.
Whereas this number, the 7268, this has been developed based on recent costs that have come in within the last 2 or 3 years primarily.
Okay, and because part of the reason I ask is I'm kind of scanning over this big chart and there's lots of numbers and so on. But as I look at some of them, these numbers look a little bit lower than what we've talked about for some of these projects, as I recall. Now, I don't know, so where do these numbers stand as far as their currency, accuracy, and so on?
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner McKinney. So this is a large plan and it's a 20-year plan. And so these are the type of cost estimates that we consider planning level cost estimates. So this is not drilled down like an engineer's estimate that we would have for a project as we go out to bid. So there may be some discrepancy there. What we do for the purposes of a plan like this is just use the formulas and the calculations from our estimator, calculate all those project costs. Some may end up a little high, some may end up lower than we think, but in the end, we believe that's the best methodology considering it's a 20-year plan with hundreds of projects to try and drill down and anticipate, well, what's it exactly going to be? We don't have the design. We don't have the engineering. We don't have a lot of those details on those projects. So it's really planning level, which is how those numbers are drawn up.
Then last question for now. So I guess my question is, so are developers suddenly going to see impact fees double? Is that what this is saying?
Well, I'll answer that, commissioners. That's up to you. And this is why we're having this work session. Ultimately, what we are doing is, our consultant Skittleson has done a great job. This is providing to you essentially an output of the process that we have gone through. We've refined the list, what we believe based on reasonable assumptions. These are just outputs. It's just a math problem of how this all comes together. Now, what we get to today is if there is consensus among the commissioners that this fee, for whatever reason you decide, is not what you're looking for, you tell staff and you say, we'd like it to be adjusted in some way. What we would do is go back with our consultant and work with them on that project list and say, you know what, maybe more of these projects should shift from construction to right-of-way preservation only. And then you see that fee go down. Maybe some of the projects should be completely removed from the plan. That's another way to see the fee go down. So that's how this process kind of works at this point. And that's what we're here today to kind of seek direction on. Ultimately, it's not staff's job to make some sort of judgment call on the fee itself. We're providing to you an output of a process, if that makes sense.
And President Gold, if I can just add to that, it is a big change. I will add, you are not the only agency though seeing these kind of changes and dealing with these kinds of construction costs. That's happening around the country. It's happening with other agencies locally. We're currently going through this process with Caldwell, with other agencies, and they're also dealing with this and seeing these kinds of increases as well.
Commissioner Nielsen?
Yeah, start with the easy question. The huge variable, I think, since the last cost estimates is right-of-way, land costs. So how much typically in a project now is the right-of-way versus construction costs? Is that percentage 30-70? Has it changed significantly? I don't have a good handle for that other than it's gone much larger, but to put into context the fee increase, how much of that is a right-of-way? Just the cost of right-of-way, yeah.
President Gold, Commissioner Nielsen, great question. The right-of-way unit costs that we applied, we did it based on, how the land is currently zoned, where it was located. So there's a range of our right-of-way costs. To answer your specific question, I'm going to turn to Mark and hopefully he can look at the spreadsheets quickly. I don't know if you're able to answer.
Like a minute or two.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's fine. I
Sorry.
can go on to my next comment.
Just to add,
Yeah.
just quickly on that, it really does depend, Commissioner, on the
Yeah.
project. There's some projects where we've been able to preserve through the development process quite a bit of right of way. So you
Right.
could have a mile of road let's say out on Ustick in Meridian, where we've preserved largely through the development process, and our right-of-way cost for that mile could be, let's say, $500,000. You could have a similar 1 mile widening on Maple Grove in South Boise, and that right-of-way cost could be $3 to $4 million. So it's really context sensitive, but kind of rule of thumb, right-of-way for us is that 20 to 30% typically on a
Yeah.
project.
One thing, and the data's here, I would like to understand better, and maybe it's just a sorted table of the impact fee eligible. I'm really curious of the projects, even in the refined list, maybe the pre-refined list of ones that are, I'm less interested in the 100% impact fee because that's helping people who aren't here yet more than where there's kind of a sweet spot of existing deficiency where people who live here that want an investment in their roadway plus additional development is anticipated. But I'd like to understand what is the range of the projects, what percent of them are impact fee eligible? I mean, it's here, but it's all sorted alphabetically. I'd like to kind of understand that gradient of how many projects are really more for the future versus needs today. Does that make sense? And that's the only way I can think to measure that.
Yeah, President Gold, Commissioner Nielsen. So everything you see here today, these are all projects that are driven by future growth. You might remember in our last work session, we did have the list of what we would call existing deficiencies in this context, which were both, there was a list of roadway projects, and then there were, I'm going to say, around 5 intersection projects, where those are the ones that are today not meeting ACHD standard. So all of these, the percentage is much smaller of existing deficiencies, but they are not included in any of these project costs that you see today. We did not, because existing deficiencies are not impact fee eligible, we did not create cost estimates for those types of projects.
But Madam President, but there are projects that are a hybrid. I mean, they're not 100% impact fee, just looking at the total project cost and then what part of that is impact fee eligible.
Yeah, that President Gold, Commissioner Nielsen, that's correct. And what you see in your spreadsheet today, so that is applying the current methodology that ACHD has historically used recently for what components of a project, even though the project is fully driven, the need for the project is driven by growth, what components of the project are impact fee eligible versus not. And the first driver of that is the Idaho Development Impact Fee Act, because it lays out specific things that are versus aren't impact fee eligible. So ACHD has screened based on those factors. And then ACHD has made some policy decisions about other components of projects, whether or not they're impact fee eligible or not. One great example is the pedestrian and bicycle component of projects. Your policy is to include pedestrian and bicycle facilities on every arterial, but you have recently, your policy decision has been, we are going to implement those through developer exaction. So developers and growth are still paying for them, but they're paying for them through exaction, where they go out and actually construct them along their frontage, as opposed to wrapping those into the impact fees. And there's policy reasons why you've done it that way. We're getting to another one, which is whether or not the reconstruction of existing lanes should be impact fee eligible or not. That's actually a policy decision we're going to be asking for your direction on in a little bit here. So that's why you see that split. It doesn't have to do with whether or not it's an existing deficiency or not, or part of the project is an existing deficiency. It has to do with, per state law, what is impact fee eligible versus not, and some previous policy decisions ACHD has made.
Yep, Madam President, I have one more question. So in the table, because there's a lot to look at here, what are the projects that are, or why are projects included where there's no estimated TIF eligible cost? As I go down this column, where there's just a little dash.
about that?
Yeah,
And explain those, yeah,
those are likely existing deficiencies.
okay,
So if it's a full existing deficiency, then it would be 0% impact fee eligible.
okay. But we would include it in the CIP for,
It would be identified as a existing
The
deficiency
deficiency.
in the CIP.
Okay.
Yes.
Madam President, one other quick note, I did take
Okay.
a look at the right-of-way costs and how
Yeah.
they compare to the total cost. So for roadway projects, it's approximately 20%
okay.
of the cost, and then for intersections, it's less than 5%.
Mhm. Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
I'm curious on just the land value assumption, the previous CIP versus today. Is that just per acre? I mean,
Yeah.
just as a
Commissioner-
coefficient, has that changed?
I'll answer it this way. It's
Yeah.
gone up a lot.
A lot. I mean,
A
a lot.
ton.
Yeah.
In some areas, we saw, 100% increase,
Yeah.
200% increase. So massive costs.
Mhm.
And when you, and it's kind of shocking when you look at some of these numbers, but as you say, as we've discussed, commissioners, we went through this, we have kind of a pre-COVID CIP and a post-COVID CIP. And that's what
Oh,
we're dealing with.
yeah.
Those inflationary factors
Mhm.
and the skyrocketing construction costs and land costs that we saw from 2020 to 2025, if you ask what's the biggest variable in this conversation, that's the biggest variable in this conversation.
And I'll probably, Madam President, look at my own, but if, it is a large increase, but I'm curious, what was the average housing price relative to versus now? That might be a similar percentage, even though the numbers have changed drastically, for perspective. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you for the questions. So we are sort of at a pause point. So before we move on, are there any other questions or commission comments just related to these sort of base case, no policy change, draft traffic impact fees?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner, President Gold. I think it's more of just a comment, because I think as we've discussed this in the CIP, there's been, lots of enthusiasm for updating the CIP and making it a reflection to like the actual needs. And then, obviously we're not there yet around how much the actual fee is going to be associated with that impact fee. But I think there just has to be kind of this awareness, and we have to be better about this. Like, growth costs money, growth needs to pay for itself. And I'm looking at this growth and the communities where this growth is happening. And I'm just looking forward to the conversations about who shoulders that burden and making sure that growth in those communities actually pays for the growth they're experiencing as much as possible.
All right, thank you. Okay.
I'm sorry, Sonia, I'm just going to jump in just for clarity, commissioners, the purpose of this work session is for us to take feedback. Lacking any further direction at this moment, we'll take that refined project list, which is the projects in for construction, the projects designated for right-of-way preservation only, and that's essentially the template that we're going to move forward with, based on what we're hearing now. You saw how that relates to the impact fee. Some of these things we can't change and don't control. That decision, though, is a decision point ultimately that the commission can make is, we want more projects to be right-of-way preservation only or vice versa. And all that does is just, modify that fee. But this is where we landed.
Well, let me just say, if I may, I have to admit, I'm a little bit hesitant, when we see that a doubling of impact fees, generally speaking, across the board, I'm not necessarily on board with that. I'd like more information, more consideration to that. I'm not 100% certain on that yet.
Oh,
So, Commissioner McKinney, I think that's the discussion that they're looking for from us, as like, maybe you have specific information that you're wanting regarding that, but sorry, Commissioner Goldthorpe, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I would ask probably Justin, since the comment was made that at least some of this is being discussed with the mayors in the last little while, or maybe as we speak, what has been their particular responses?
Looks like the director would like to take that question, which I'm happy about.
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, I've met now with 5 of our 6 mayors, and I'm still working to get in with the county as well. Generally, it's a math problem, and they seem to understand that. The costs have gone up, and if you're going to pay for it and growth pays for itself, that's what you need to do. You need to have those. I think everyone recognizes that the developers are going to have an opinion about this. If you think of $3,000, I just was pulling up some numbers. The median home price in 2012, which was just the numbers that were given me, was under 200,000, and now we're over 450,000, right? It's about 250% growth over 12, 13 years. So how much 50% or 100% increase fits into that? I think it's pretty reasonable when you think of the increase in costs. Now, will we hear from the development community? We anticipate yes. We anticipate they'll say that these are a big deal. The costs are so much. But in the end, in most cases, they're passing along these costs to individuals and those who lease their properties and or purchase their properties. And so we recognize that there is a cost to it, but in most cases, and that's really what I'm generally hearing from the mayors. In some cases, some of the mayors are very excited to hear that the fees are going up because hopefully that means we can afford more projects and get to their communities sooner.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I've been sitting here for the whole time we've talked about this since 2014. And we've only raised impact fees a few $100. And we have been getting further and further and further behind. And even though we paid off our impact fee loan balance, I'm a very, very firm believer that growth should pay for itself. So I am not in the least bit. I won't object to us charging the maximum impact fees that we can.
Can I ask one more question? Thank you. So let's talk about that. What's the kind of the history of impact fees over recent history? How much have they changed over the last 10 years?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney. So ACHD's impact fees, and I think Commissioner Goldthorpe kind of categorized it correctly. You know, since approximately 2012, we did an update in 2016 where there was I would say a more modest increase. But remember, these discussions and cost estimates and all the analysis, it plays out in the broader economic conversation and the broader, economic conditions. And we had a significant, economic event in our country in 2007, 2008. So that plays into some of how this plays out. Different commissions historically have had different impressions on how they want to approach this question. So in general, that kind of 2,800 to 3,300 range for a single family home has been in place at ACHD for a very, very long time. And certainly staff recognizes this is what we're doing here, and this represents a significant increase, which is why we want to, talk about it and make sure everyone's really aware of it. But once again, doing the math problem, it really is those costs of right-of-way and construction that they drive this math problem more than anything else. And those are the costs that we've seen just go up significantly since 2019, 2020. And we've given the commission previous presentations on a lot of those costs.
So I'm wondering if I can, so if we had to put it in percentage terms, what has been the increase in impact fees? And I guess the appropriate way to view it would be to say, okay, over X period of time, I guess real estate costs have gone up by such and such, or construction and development costs have gone up by so much. How have impact fees changed relative to that? And I guess that's kind of what it comes down to. So it sounds like what you're saying is that over, if I don't know if we went 10 years or 15 years, whatever, if we go back some span of years, our impact fees have changed X percent. These other things that we're talking about have changed Y percent. I'd kind of like to have those numbers to compare, and that's sort of what I'm hoping to be able to compare apples to apples in this case.
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, we could provide some data like that. I would just say the impact fees have changed a small percentage and all the other costs have changed a large percentage, but we can probably run some range.
And that's helpful information, especially when talking to the public about it. You know,
Yeah.
if we have this decision to make, you know, we need to have good reasons to make it and be able to explain that to John Q. Public.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, based on the numbers that I just shared, the cost increase on houses would have been about 250% increase since 2012. Our fees have maybe 10-12% increased,
Yeah.
right? So it's a long time that the fees have been, you can say in whatever way, they've been held lower to just try and manage that fee, but ultimately that's not resulting in us and growth paying for itself.
Commissioner Nelson first, sorry.
Okay. Sonia or maybe the staff, we have a couple of great, very experienced developers on the Impact Fee Advisory Committee. What was their, now we don't have minutes of their meeting yet. I haven't watched the YouTube, but what was their reaction? If you can summarize it.
Yeah, President Gold, Commissioner Nielsen. So there are two developers on the CICAC. One, I think more focused on residential developing and one more focused on commercial developing. I will say they had a lot of input as we get to the policy decisions that we're coming up to now. I don't want to quote anybody, but I think they're, in short, I would characterize their feedback as, we understand costs have gone up significantly and we understand that's the main driver of these.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
but I would not want to speak for them, but I
Right,
think that
right.
was the feedback we received in the meeting.
Okay. I will watch the YouTube video. Haven't got to it yet, but you know, since we're trying to get us moving ahead, Justin, I just want to put on the record, I have a concern, and this is going in the wrong direction, of the R173 segment, in that and it's a line on the map. I get that, but I'm concerned if it has to shift eastward because it's going through a construction site right now. Should the cost estimate for that be looked at? Is that a big enough change where if it has to move down East Columbia Road a bit? I don't know. So I just want it to have a good estimate in there.
Yeah, President Gold, Commissioner Nelson. Yeah, we, so that, just so the record is aware, that's Technology Way
Yeah.
over just to the east of the freeway.
Memory.
We can take a look at that and see if that cost needs to be adjusted based on that comment. Appreciate that comment.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the current aerial on Google Maps and I was shocked at the extent of the area.
And that's part of the challenge, as Justin was mentioning, this is a
Yeah.
very high level plan.
Right.
You know, these, for the new roadways shown on this
Mhm.
map in the dashed lines, these are not ultimate alignments by any means. These are meant to represent connections. Alignments will change and shift over time. So we're doing our best, but we'll
Yeah, if
absolutely
it has to
take a closer look at that one in particular.
add a couple miles to the segment, then, you know, at what point does it need
That
to be
would
looked
change.
at? That's all. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah,
But
appreciate that comment.
Commissioner Goldthorpe.
One thing to add to what both Ryan and Justin were saying about the percentages. Ryan mentioned how much the cost of housing has gone up, how little the cost of our impact fees has gone up. It's at least that bad when you look at our costs of construction, which is the bottom line. You know, regardless of what homes cost, if you have to pay $20 million a mile instead of 5 in 2012, away you go.
Madam President,
Commissioner
key off of
Nelson?
that, Sonia and Mark, well, just for comparison, you had looked at current impact fees in other areas, and I think the Midstar was higher than ACHD, and that's a newer CIP. Could you remind me what that was? That's the Canyon County side of Star with Canyon Highway District in Middleton.
Yeah, Madam President,
Yeah.
Commissioner Nilsson. So Mid-Star is the area around, in Middleton and kind of surrounding area. Highway District 4 is also on that schedule. And I believe right now it's around 5,000,
5,000.
just at 5,000. And right now, they're exploring increasing that to the upper 5,000. So that's what was
Okay.
presented to their advisory committee a couple weeks ago, and it's going to their city council
Okay.
in early August for adoption, just for some context. And
Yeah.
city of Caldwell is in the mid 4,000s right now
Mhm.
for a single family home.
Yeah.
I guess to clarify.
Justin, I appreciate you asking the commission for, for a definite direction on this. I think there is consensus. And I just want to echo a couple of comments from the director that, in my conversations with mayors, kind of that same sentiment that with the increased impact fees, we might be able to address more projects. The reality is that it's more expensive to get these things done, and the impact fee is supposed to help offset that to some degree, and that gap could be shored up a little bit by increasing it. So, yeah, I think you have consensus to go with those increased numbers.
Thank you very much. All right, so moving on to some of the policy level decisions. So all of our discussion up to now has focused on the projects and resulting impact fees, assuming no key policy changes to these 4 best practice areas we really started this process with. Of these 4, we're really still looking for commission direction on the 2 elements of service area and then expanding the range of impact fee eligibility. So let's start with service area. As a reminder, service area is clearly laid out in the Idaho Development Impact Fee Act. It is a boundary within an impact fee area that essentially functions as its own transportation system, where the growth within that area is driving the need for capacity in that area, and doesn't drive the need for capacity in other areas to the same extent. Part of the Impact Fee Act says that service area does need to be clearly defined by what it says are planning and engineering principles. So it is something that needs supporting data to justify why we're defining a service area the way we are. You may remember we looked at 3 potential scenarios for a service area within Ada County. Those were maintaining a single service area, which has been ACHD's current policy, keeping a single service area, but adding an overlay zone, and then going to a 2 service area model. So I'll just touch a little bit on what each of those looks like. So for the single service area, you're likely familiar with it. It's what we have today. And essentially what it does is keep all the projects and all of the fees within one pot. So growth anywhere pays the same impact fee, and any impact fee that comes into ACHD can be spent on any project within the entire county. It has provided you with that flexibility to do that. In the scenario where we would maintain a single service area but add an overlay zone, this scenario was developed based on differences in travel patterns that we saw within that orange identified service area. And this would recognize and reduce traffic impact fees within that boundary based on the different travel patterns we saw in terms of having shorter trip lengths and also having a higher non-auto mode share. And an important thing to recognize about this model with an overlay zone is very different than a service area. So within this model, all fees would go into the same pot, even though fees within that small area would be slightly reduced. And the district would not be restricted on where fees would be spent. So even if fees came in within that service area, they could be spent anywhere within the county, depending on where the priorities were for the commission. And then the final scenario was a 2 service area model. And the data as it related to mode share, trip length, and trip capture, where trips were being generated and where they traveled to, supported the one multiple service area model that the data supported was a east-west 2 service area model. So the boundary line is approximately Cole Road. And in this model, this would be quite different to the 2 previous models that we discussed. So growth in the west would pay 1 fee, and the traffic impact fees generated within the west could only be spent on projects there. And similarly to the east, they would have their own set of projects, their own fees, and any fees generated within the east could only be spent on projects within the east. So there are some constraints that this model introduces. I know we spent 2 work sessions talking about this topic, so I don't want to repeat myself too much, but let's just talk about some of the key considerations for these different models, and happy to answer any additional questions if there are some. So first, either the single service area or the single service area plus overlay zone, in terms of project implementation, that maintains the highest level of flexibility for the district in terms of where fees come in from and where they can be spent. There are no restrictions on fees only going to certain projects or certain areas. In the 2 service area model, like I said, fees and projects need to be maintained separately, accounted for separately, and allocated separately in those 2 separate service areas. So for the single service area, it has maximum flexibility for where and how fees are spent, and this would be the same for the overlay zone as well. It gives the district the most flexibility about how to respond to changing needs within the county, when projects may need to be implemented or where you want to shift funding around. And it is also the least complex in terms of ACHD's administration, accounting procedures, and also just explaining it to those people who need to understand it, whether it be the development community, your partner agencies. It's the most simple process, if you will. With the single service area plus overlay zone, it maintains. Oh, yes, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sonia. I noticed that you have the CICAC recommendation to the single
Yes.
service area. When did they provide that?
Yeah, that's great. If we want to jump to that, I'm happy.
Oh,
to-
sorry.
No,
can
I'm
get-
happy to do
so
that.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sonia.
No,
I
that's
have
okay.
to-
So that the CICAC met about 2 weeks ago. It was the 30th, June 30th, if I remember correctly. Yep. And so we gave them this exact same presentation as we're giving to you today. And they wanted to provide their recommendation to the commission on what they as a committee felt was best. So they took a vote on it.
Just after that presentation.
Just-
So they didn't deliberate any longer than that.
No, just
was
in
your-
that meeting.
Interesting.
And I will say it was not a unanimous vote. There were three members wanted something different, and I can go into those details. But the remaining 4 members wanted to move forward and recommend this model.
Great. Sorry to interrupt you.
No,
Sonia. That's helpful.
you're
No,
great. You're
Context
great.
is helpful.
Yeah. In terms of the single service area plus overlay zone, it still maintains that flexibility for where fees come in and where they can be spent. It does acknowledge the unique travel patterns that result from some of the local agency land use decisions. So it does acknowledge different zoning, different development patterns, and how those can result in different travel patterns. It does introduce some complexity though. Obviously, there is explaining why this area, what makes it special, why should it be different. Could also be looking to the future and saying, what should our criteria be to establish other overlay zones in the future if they should emerge? So there is that acknowledgement. And then you can see what how it would change the impact fees. Now, this is for the single family home impact fee. So countywide, outside of the service area, we would maintain that $72.68 service fee for a single family home. But within the overlay zone, it would be reduced to acknowledge the fact that it's got shorter trips within that area, as well as a higher proportion of non-auto modes. I will say the representative from Eagle on the CACAC, this was the model that they were interested in. They didn't make a formal motion, but they were very intrigued by this model. I think thinking of the future and how it could be applied maybe to other areas in the county. And then finally, the 2 service area model. So again, this requires ACHD to maintain 2 separate funds for the different service areas. It restricts where money can be spent. It sounds like Commissioner Goldthorpe, you remember when there were multiple service areas and interfund loans had to be made either between service areas or from ACHD's general fund into the impact fee funds if certain projects arise as a priority and the impact fees within that certain service area weren't available to implement it. So that is something to be aware of. It may require that. Yes.
Can you remind us how many zones there were at that time?
The last time, I think there were 4. Yes, I believe there were 4. So it does increase the accounting and administration complexity. It does limit some flexibility for developers. We have developers who do implement CIP projects for you, do go out there and construct them, and then use impact fee credits to get back that money that they would have otherwise spent on impact fees. So this would limit where and when they could use those impact fee credits. I will say from the CICAC, 2 agencies, both Boise and Star, this was the model that they felt would be best for their agencies. Their representatives voiced that they felt this would be a benefit for their agencies. And then you can see there how the impact fees would differ between the west service area. In that west service area, the fees would go up to about $8,100. So that would be approximately west of Cole Road. And then in the east service area, they would be about $5,400.
Question.
Okay. Yeah, so I think at this time, we welcome discussion and input and hopefully your direction on, is there a service area model you would like us to move forward with that's different than the current policy? And I'll go back and just keep this slide up for reference in the discussion.
Commissioner Nielsen?
Yeah, Sonia, I'm just trying to understand how it resulted, and there's a lot in play, but between the overlay and the 2 service area, there's only $30, am I doing the math, $32 difference. So when I see that this whole, let me get to the whole east thing, that's telling me that still has pretty different travel characteristics than just a little overlay that would just cause a very small change in the impact fee for that whole area versus the much smaller overlay area. Am I understanding that right? I mean, is that a correct assumption or deduction on my part?
Yes, President Gold, Commissioner Nielsen. So it's a little different than that. So in the overlay zone model, so the reduction between 72.68 and 53.78, that is strictly because it's an overlay zone and not a service area. It's a different concept. That is strictly a reduction based on the percent difference in trip length we're seeing within that zone and the percent difference in mode share. In the 2 service area model, the difference, those different fees they're not based on trip length or mode share or anything like that. They're based on The service area was defined based on that. But those fees are strictly based on which projects are in that service area and how much do they cost.
Mhm.
That's the, where we get it. So the reason I guess you can see the east service area, and you can probably see this from some of your maps, maybe.
Yeah.
It does not have as many projects as the west service area, but it also does not have the same amount of growth that's been allocated to the west service area. And the projects that it does have, some of them, thank you, Mark, some of them are quite expensive projects. And that would be things like the whole Lake Hazel extension and some of the other projects. So they do have different, some of these different factors are different. So these change in VMT, trip length, adjustment factor. So in the scenario where we have two service areas, we get individual factors for each service area.
Do
So-
we have those then somewhere?
Not off the top of my head, but yes. we
Could they
do.
be provided
They
later?
absolutely
Okay,
could be
yes, that would be
provided,
really
yes,
helpful. Thank
yes.
you.
But
Yeah,
I will
yeah.
say the main driver, I would say, is what
Projects.
projects do they have? How much growth are those projects being distributed amongst and how much do they cost?
Sonia. So then have we considered if there were the two service areas where there's a higher impact fee in the west portion, if that changes the amount of impact fee from that original, like the beginning of the slide where it was like with this revised map, 2.19 billion total, and then 1.49 billion for traffic impact fees. So would those zones change the amount of impact fee collected, I guess, is my question.
President Gold, hopefully I'm understanding your question. The total project costs, so we have the same projects, the same total project costs. They're just allocated between two service areas now. So, and I also don't have these numbers in front of me, so I apologize, but the west would have so much of the cost and the east would have so much of the cost. But they would add up to the same in total.
Not for the project cost, but for the impact fees collected.
Oh, how that would change? Yeah. So, great question. Thank you for clarifying. So how many impact fees are collected and when they're collected? That is really a determination of where and when growth happens. So, we establish the costs based on the assumed 20-year horizon of growth, but exactly where and when that happens is all driven by the development community. So we could establish a two service area model and the development community could say, you know, the type of development that is being warranted and that people want is all multifamily housing in Boise. And so that would mean only the east service area would be developing impact fees and nothing else. Or they could say, no, people only want single family residential. And so we're going to be building that out in Meridian, Eagle, Star, Kuna. And so the west service area could be generating impact fees, but the east service area could not. And, you know, I don't know, you know, it's hard
Yeah.
to say 5 years from now what development will be doing exactly.
Yeah, and you had there was that disclaimer on that said, you know, these numbers, we're assuming no change in the policies.
Yes.
And so I'm just wondering if you had considered that, like, if some of these changes were made. I assume that those numbers would be a little bit different. That's all.
Oh, sorry. And I apologize if I'm not answering your question. So the numbers on the bottom of the screen, so you can see the adjusted impact fees here. So these would be your revised impact fees if the commission makes the policy decision to go with a single service area or a two service area. So these are what those fees, how those fees would change with your different policy decisions. I hope I'm answering your question.
Not quite, but we can move on. Yeah, Director.
Madam President, I think just the thing that helped me as I looked at this, that was helpful, and I'll just use my map as a visual for you. This is basically the west area, You see the number of projects that are there. It's also where the growth is projected. And this is the east area, which really consists of State Street, the Lake Hazel extension, Eisenman,
Probably some intersections.
of some intersections,
Yeah.
you know, there's a few projects there. And I think just the thing that's helpful in understanding, you know, as you look at this from the perspective of, you know, for example, the State Street project. To fund that project, we'll have to look at what growth is available or what growth happens on this side. And so being able to do that, it will take whatever time it takes for the growth to generate the impact fees on that side. You're going to be able to get projects done a bit faster on this side because that's where the growth is happening more generally. It's just another example that kind of threw a question in it for me is, you know, Murillo Farms was recently approved by the city of Boise, which is Lake Hazel and Maple Grove. So that would be in the west service area. The city of Boise asked Murillo to contribute to the orchard realignment project. It was a city condition. It was like a $2 million contribution towards that. But Murillo Farms in the two service area scenario would not be a contributor to any of the growth that happens, but would benefit greatly from Lake Hazel, the Lake Hazel extension, orchard realignment. Does that make sense? It's on a different side of the line.
Condition wasn't impact fee related.
Correct. It was not impact fee. I just think that that's an interesting one of the challenges to illustrate that just from an example perspective is you have a development there that's on one side of the line, benefits from projects on the other side of the line, but won't be paying any fees towards that. Does that make sense? I'm just giving you some of the things to consider as you look at that. Now that's a reality. We have projects that are happening in Elmore County that we get zero impact fees from, but they will impact our roads. Just wanted to give kind of those conditions from all.
It also happens.
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to, I mean, I appreciate that. And I want to emphasize that that was not part of the impact. It wasn't a part of impact fees, but, and also that neck of the woods, I appreciate Boise in that part of the community because they understand like that's a regional, there's some regional nuance, right? With that project. And they were very context sensitive to what types of requests they could make of that developer, which I think is what I'm trying to lean into this conversation as to how can we best have, again, make growth pay for itself, be more context sensitive to the growth that's being experienced. And that was just the city being really mindful of the fact that folks are going to be moving or living there and likely traveling to Micron, right? So having the two, it's probably not gonna be too surprising that I'm not super supportive of the overlay. I'm gonna like jump ahead a little bit, but like the two service areas, I think are more in line with that context sensitive mindset that we saw with that Murillo Farms piece. Not that it means that we shouldn't, doesn't mean that we should do one thing or the other, but anyway, more of that type of theme.
Commissioner Nielsen.
Don't make me do this by myself, but I will disagree that we don't know where development's happening because we spend a lot of time at Compass in the demographic work group assigning growth to traffic analysis zones. And we look at it, it's reconciled every year, it's updated on a regular basis. It's our best shot at where we think, and it's maintained. So I am curious on what is the growth in households and jobs in the east versus the west. So I don't know. I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, I have that information because that was part.
As I say, growth happens here, but it's
Yeah.
just a different kind of growth too. So, but in terms of volume of growth, I really.
President Gold, Commissioner Nielsen. So we
Yeah.
did present that in our one of our work sessions, but I understand it's been over a year.
Yeah.
So if you look at the county as a whole, so the west service area has 76% of the household growth and the east has 24% of the household growth. Of the employment growth, the west has 56% of the employment growth and the east has 44% of the employment growth. But I will compare that to also, just so you have all the context, In terms of the project costs,
Mhm.
it's 85% of the
Right.
project costs are in the west and 15% are in the east. So that, hopefully that provides that context for you.
And that's the project cost under current policy versus if we,
No, that would be if you would
Just
split
total.
it down the line.
okay.
But in the entire county,
Total,
Yeah.
okay, I'm with you.
of
Total
the
project
full
cost.
projects within the entire county. Yeah.
The previous days.
Oh, yes. Do you have those changed significantly?
Yeah.
I think it's more like 80.
80-20?
80-20 now?
It might be more to 80-20, excuse
Yeah,
me.
now that
Thank
we
you
have-
for clarifying that.
Commissioner Goldthorpe or McKinney, did you have a comment or did I miss you?
Well, I'll make a comment. I think the added complexity of going to service zones, service areas, the cost and complexity of doing different service areas and the cost that is reduced flexibility, because flexibility is an important factor in any organization, and the reduced flexibility, that has a cost as well. I don't think it's justified in switching from what we've done. When I think about service areas, it's kind of a been there, done that view on my part, because we had it in the past and it didn't work very well. I think it would be a mistake to try to go back to that. Instead, we collect impact fees and we can use them where they need to be used, or the projects where they need to be used, where they're justified. And I think that works.
Have we calculated at all what the administrative cost would be for the overlay zone versus single versus two?
Madam President, members of the commission, I mean, it's kind of a tough calculation to do. We have staff dedicated to this effort. It's Megan's team that primarily administers our impact fee program. I think the administrative burden, I don't think that should be, the main reason why you make a big policy decision like this. I'm not going to say today that we have to go hire 10 people. I don't think that's going to happen. If you look at the increased complexity, maybe it's half of an FTE as we figure all this out and work through it. If that, that's how I would look at it. But, for these types of decisions, I would, I don't know if that's going to be your primary driver. Certainly over to the commission on that, but, and I'll allow the director to weigh in too.
Thanks, Justin. I appreciate that.
Madam President, Commission, we will do whatever you direct us to do in this case. And so we understand it takes a little bit more explaining, it takes a little bit more work, but we do look to the commission. And that's why, we wanted to have this conversation, because we do want to get to the end and have a plan and be able to generate the impact fees. And so we're looking kind of for that head nod, and we'll go whichever direction. We just want to make sure you have all the facts.
Thanks, Director. Commissioner Nelson.
My priority is fairness, and that people not pay more that they pay the fair impact fee for the true impact that they have. And I don't think, at least in my district, I'm still weighing the overlay versus the two service areas, but I have total confidence in the staff and the tools and the resources compared to this much smaller jurisdictions that have multiple service areas that we learned about earlier in this process. That is not a concern of mine. I know they can manage two. Maybe 4 in the past was a little much and we didn't have the good tools, the GIS and everything to track things easily. But that is zero concern on my part of that would be much added cost to do two, whether it be an overlay or two directions. But I think fairness in terms of paying the impact, that the impact fee is most closely related to your true impact. And since we've heard throughout this whole process, we have different travel characteristics. I want to respect that. That is really important to me that's front and center, because along with the fact that the administrative burden, I think, is going to be minimal. With that being said, I'm still going to look at the project list and really vet that out till I'm satisfied. So I appreciate all of I just want to, before I forget, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, staff. There's a lot of work here. So it's just, it just boggles my mind. And I really want to get into the projects that will benefit at least my district. But still, I want to make sure that the other areas of Ada County, that those projects can be funded. So in terms of the growth and the impact fee generated, and as long as it's comparable, that would be, that's what I'm hoping to find. So.
Commissioner Pickering.
Yeah, thanks. Echoing the work to get us here. I think just I did some quick math looking at the map. I think it's really helpful to get this on the record too. So in my district, there's just 6 projects that would be right of way or construction eligible in the CIP, just 6. I think
There may be some additional intersection
Sure,
projects.
sure, but
Yeah.
I'm just
Yep.
going off of the map, right? What we're looking at today. There's only 5-ish in Commissioner Nelson's district. 5.
Yeah.
There's 21. Yeah, it's around there. It's right down there. There's 21 in Commissioner Goldthorpe's district. There's 13 in Commissioner McKinney's district and 14 in Commissioner Gold's district. So, and then there's 12 in the western part. So there, and speaking to fairness, right? Growth paying for itself. Clearly, we all know this, right? The western part of our county is experiencing a lot of growth. They should be paying for that growth. Looking at, and also it's 5 times as much. So if you just add the projects that are in the eastern part of this boundary on Cole Road, there's 11 projects, 51 in the west. So I think I think the single service area might have worked in the past, right, to get us to where we are now, but we're changing. We've changed. The growth patterns are different. The travel patterns are different. And I'm also hearing from mayors too, that they want those fees spent in their, generated and spent in their communities, right? So if we have this line, it kind of helps us figure out, oh, is this getting us closer to that more control that they're after, right? Because they want to see that income spent and generated on things that they understand and they know. And also with the Micron expansion too, there's a lot of chatter about the Lake Hazel extension and how to finance that, right? So I think it actually makes it simpler for us to talk about how do we actually pay for this if we do have a two service area breakdown, because it makes the math a little bit easier on that part. So I'm not particularly supportive of the overlay zone. I think it doesn't get enough to the crux of the issue. I'm very much leaning towards, continuing to talk about single and 2 service area, but obviously I'm just sharing this with the 3 commissioners that have all the projects here. I'm not going to be supportive of a CIP that has this many projects if we're gonna do a single service fee, because Boise in my district is gonna subsidize you guys. So I think there needs to be a harder conversation about what are you guys willing to give up if you still want Boise to subsidize your growth?
President Gold, I greatly appreciate those comments. I just want to add a piece of data for consideration as you are talking about that question. So going back to this idea of internal capture, like where growth is generating trips versus where those trips are going, and are they staying within those service districts? I just want to remind you of those numbers for the 2 service area model. So in the West service area model, that internal capture is 74%. So 74% of the trips generated in that area stay within that area. In the East service area, it's 65%. So the trips generated in the east, 65 of them stay within the east. So just so you have that information, and that, you know, compares to a single service area where we had 93% of the trips generated in Ada County stay within Ada County. So just that's, I want to provide the information as you discuss that question and that topic.
Which I think, again, goes back to what I'm hearing from mayors. They want the fee to be spent in their communities. So anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Pickering. I also want to echo that, having recently talked to all of the mayors and regularly meeting with the 4 mayors in my district. And that's something that I consistently hear too, is in addition to feeling like we need to increase the amount of impact fees so that we can pay for more projects, is a desire to have those impact fees, you know, able to be allocated in those areas. And I do feel like this map is really telling, just in terms of the type and like need, size, scale of the projects that are coming up on the horizon, and how they reflect the different growth and not only current travel patterns, but future travel patterns. Like, this is designed to support the future travel pattern. So I think I agree with those comments that the single service area has served us well over these last years. But as this county has grown so significantly, I'm supportive of taking a harder look at the 2 service areas.
Madam President. And I don't want to get in the middle of what the good debate the commission's having. The one comment that we do, just from a perspective from staff, want to make sure that's on the record and for consideration. As we collect impact fees, we have 8 years to spend them. When the projects are larger, we'll have to segment projects or other things in order to even be able to afford them. Because if we can't collect the impact fees, enough impact fees to pay for the larger project, we just have to find a way to make sure that we're spending those, just to get that on the record.
Yep. Commissioner Goldthorpe?
I'll weigh in here without a whole lot of minutia. I'm just fine with the way things have been handled and going, and I see really no compelling reason for me to go anyway but one single service area.
Madam President,
Commissioner Pickering?
Commissioner Goldthorpe, question for you. So with that in mind, are you amenable to updating the CIP and making it not as expensive, right? You're having different real expectations for
Concerned that
projects.
CIP ought to be as expensive as it is.
Okay.
Hey, I just had one other thought, Madam President. Just, I don't want to throw out the concept of the overlay zone if there are other, but I don't know that this is the right time. I guess I haven't, you know, obviously Eagle and Meridian are, oh gosh, maybe Kuna, I'm not as familiar, are making major investments in their downtown areas, but I don't know from a land use perspective that they have a lot of development in those areas. That would warrant a service area. And that might be, it's a good idea, but we may not be ripe for that, to spend time on coming up with a criteria on how to define future ones. But I don't know if, I just put that out there.
Yeah, and Madam President, I can speak to that briefly. The concept of the overlay zone was essentially new to ACHD for this CIP update process. It was something that Kittleson brought forward as an idea to address the concern about travel patterns and recognizing unique travel patterns that may exist within certain parts of the county. We did a pretty deep dive on this when we developed the zone that's being presented today. And as the county sits right now, and based on the projections, this was the only area that really exhibited clear distinction. Now, could that change over time? Absolutely. Through growth and different land use plans and changes by the cities, that's something that could be addressed in future updates. I think the idea of overlay zones, now that it's in part of our analysis process, will be considered as we update future CIPs.
Yeah.
So whether, it's appropriate or not now, I think we'd say this is the one we felt most comfortable with for sure. But certainly in the future, it's possible. Yeah.
Okay.
I think a big reason that a lot of these projects are necessary on the west side, right, is because of a lot of the growth in Canyon County as well. So a lot of the, we obviously see with like Highway 16 expansion and the impacts to our local system and things like that. I know that Star is seeing that Highway 44 and the use there. And obviously we can't collect impact fees for growth in Canyon County. So I think just whatever factors we can consider to kind of mitigate and direct those costs as best we can. The impact fee costs to help support Ada County residents. And the single overlay just does not feel like it does that for me. Commissioner McKinney and Goldthorpe, I don't know if you have any additional information that could help you, like if you have lingering questions or any clarifying information that could help you or if you're just where you are.
Personally, I'm just where I am. I've been considering everything we've been talking about the last year and a half as it's come. And pretty much had that decided before I got here today.
And can I make one additional thought? Something to consider is when we're talking about, a few minutes ago, we were looking at the overall proposed change in impact fees. The different examples that were given of single family homes, commercial, and so on. And we're talking about a doubling of impact fee rates for developers. If we look at the difference in impact fees based upon the service area or the overlay zone options that are presented here, they're relatively small. So it's kind of like we're saying no problem about doubling them, but let's add this additional layer of complexity to our system for a relatively small difference. Plus, here's the other fact to consider is if the concern is about dollars staying in zones, the impact fees collected are proportional to where development is. And so there are less impact fees being collected in places where there isn't as much development and more in places where there is more. So the idea that there's a huge shifting of money from one side of the county to the other, I don't think really stands up. I don't think that really, that perception, I think is a little bit misplaced.
Madam President,
No, I was
I think,
just,
Commissioner McKinney, I want to just speak to that though. So what I'm hearing from the team here, it's whenever we have a development application, they all pay an ACHD impact fee.
Based on the type of
Correct,
development.
right.
Mhm.
And development is happening across the county. It is.
Well,
And it's just different types of development. And I think that's what folks were trying to describe is the different types. Isn't that correct, Sonia? There's different types of development that's happening in different parts.
Yeah, I would say that's correct. I mean, it's not, there's only one type happening
Right.
here and only, but
It's a different mix, right?
each partner agency has their own zoning and
Correct.
priorities and things like that when it comes
Right.
to development. Yes, that's
So-
correct.
So I would say it's incorrect to say that Boise isn't growing and therefore isn't paying. No, they are. They're just paying different rates because they have different growing patterns and different types of development. So they are paying.
Well, but there's also a different quantity. The simple fact is that on the east side, much more of the real estate is already developed as opposed to on the west side where there's lots of open land that is being initially developed for
Are
the
you-
first time.
Are you speaking by like acre or unit? Because there's
Both.
it's different.
It's both.
Trisha, sorry.
Yeah,
Commissioner Nelson.
yeah, Madam President, that's why I asked about the projections for residential in terms of in as much as household growth, the east is 24% versus 76%. To me, that's not a wash. That's very different quantities of growth between the
Right,
two
so-
service areas.
Right, so the west side is, you're saying growth in,
Represents 76% of the household growth versus
On the-
24% of the growth in the is happening in the east.
right, okay.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what I'm saying. There's more growth happening in the west. That's exactly what she just said.
But it's, yeah,
Yeah.
74% of the
76 versus 20.
76% of
household
the
growth on
household
the west
growth
side.
is on the west side of the county.
50%.
It makes sense
56%
then.
job, 85%.
Higher proportions of impact fees then are being paid
Mhm.
in these areas. And of course, you can see we're spending a lot of money building roads on the west side of the county, and all of that kind of fits together to try to sort of, in some ways, I don't know, to try to kind of force it or change it based on a perception that, fairness is a difficult word to use because you can never, it's.
No, it's based on travel characteristic differences. It's very, I'm using
No,
it quite
fairness-
precisely. Yeah.
Fairness is a
Yeah.
word that can never be
Mhm.
defined. It's infinitely malleable. You can always say that something is fair or unfair. So there's always an argument that can be made, and that's why it's not a word that's helpful for us to use. The reality is, we've got a system that works pretty well, and we're talking about making a significant change in the amounts, and then we're struggling mightily about a small change over here. And I think that's a battle that's not wise to try to fight. Let's just keep the overall system the way it is. And yeah, impact fees need to go up, and let's move along that way.
Madam President, I just want to say, I make decisions based on data, not emotion or perception. And I have really good data to me that is moving toward a two-service area, like I said before. I just want to say that. I don't want to have my words or thoughts characterized any differently than data-based. So. And I recognize I'm very familiar with the data compared to most of you. And, but I just want to say that's how I make decisions. And I make decisions, I can define fairness as looking at the travel characteristic data that's been presented, and those differences to me are significant. And if you want me to define significance is that it's clearly not way outside any margin of error. So, but I appreciate the level of data that we have for a CIP, which is a plan, but I think it's at a level that really highlights those differences for me. So, thank you.
President Gold, would it be helpful to refresh memories on what that travel
What is this?
characteristic data look like,
Our
or?
Director Head can tell us what he just handed out
Yes.
first.
Yeah,
I need a
Madam
title.
President, Commissioner, President Gold, Commission, what we just handed out is the impact fee collections last year and this year to date, to give you quantities, numbers of impact fees generated in each jurisdiction, both residential and commercial.
So, I'm sorry, so is that since January 1, 2024,
2024 is the full fiscal year.
the fiscal year? Okay.
2025 is just
FY
fiscal
24.
year to date.
And FY 25 today. Okay. Thank you.
Madam President. Yeah, I think this is really helpful. So there you can, I mean, see just at first glance, like obviously the city Meridian is experiencing a ton of growth. But in terms of scale, Boise is next and then Kuna. Oh, and then sorry, there's Star too up there. So I think like this notion that Boise somehow isn't generating impact fees is not accurate as well. So thanks.
Sonia, sorry, can you repeat your question?
I was just asking if it would be helpful to refresh the commission's memory on what those travel pattern differences are between the two service areas. But
Sure.
only if it's helpful. Okay.
You're gonna, excuse me, Madam President, you're gonna provide the factors or whatever for each two as a
Yeah,
follow-up.
We
Yeah,
can provide that.
yeah.
Now, I'll remind you, Commissioner Nielsen,
Yeah.
those factors are from the model,
Right.
how we, as the regional travel demand model, how we established the service area boundaries were based on the travel patterns actually seen from replica data. Yeah. So in a single service area, the average trip length was 5.7. In the two service area model, the west had a trip length of 5.9 and the east had a trip length of 5.5. So going up 0.2 or going down 0.2 from that countywide average. The ped and bike mode share is 11% countywide. In the two service area model, the west is 10% and the east is 15%. So a 15% difference there in the ped and bike mode share. 5%, excuse me,
5%,
thank
yeah.
you. And then I previously provided the internal capture rates, but again, those were 94% of trips generated in the west stay in the west, and 65% of the trips generated in the east stay in the east.
Sorry, did you say 95%? Last time you said 74%.
Sorry, I must be 74% of the trips generated in the west stay in the west, and 65 in the east. 93 is the countywide. As a countywide, how many of the trips generated in Ada County stay within Ada County? Sorry
Madam
if I
President,
misspoke in
Can
any
I,
of those.
can I ask you a question about the internal? So just speaking to the e-service area, so 35%, it doesn't mean that the 35% go to the west. They just go outside the east. They could be going up to Bogus or Mountain Home or somewhere else. Is that correct assumption? Okay,
That's correct.
All right.
Yeah, yes.
okay, thanks.
Well, but you did say 95% stay within the county.
Yes, 93% stay within the county, yeah.
Of the total,
Of
yeah.
all trips in
all
Ada
trips,
County.
yeah,
So
93.
the majority of them would still be staying within Ada County, but yes.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Madam President,
Commissioner.
may I ask one quick question to the director on this chart of the impact fees collected for the last 2 years? There's a tremendous jump in Boise, city of Boise, under the commercial category. Is that largely reflect the Micron expansion? Is that where the bulk of that is coming from, or am I just imagining it? Because that's like a doubling in 1 year.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, I think there have been two significant commercial impact fees paid this year, one by Micron and one by St. Luke's.
Mhm.
Are there any other questions or comments on this item?
Okay.
Commissioner Nelson.
Yeah, this is where, looking at the director, Justin. So this is for, where we're at July, say a year and a half of data. So if I wanted to ballpark what we would accumulate or have to spend within 8 years, I mean, it's going to be a moving total. Would that be, if I were somehow satisfied that what we would collect could actually be spent, or am I overthinking it?
Madam President, Commissioner Nielsen, once again, hard to predict
Yeah.
the impact fees grant. One variable is the amount of the fee. This is based on current fees.
Mhm.
So if we have
Yeah.
a significant increase in the fee collection because the fee itself is
Mhm.
increased, that's one variable.
Mhm.
And then the amount of growth is the other variable, which can vary widely depending on the year.
Sure.
Economically, this area has experienced, I think, since COVID and then moving to today, I think very steady and
Mhm.
strong growth. That isn't always the case over a 20-year period. There are periods of
Mhm.
lower growth. So it's hard to know. The way the fees are collected will be, based on how that growth plays out. And there can be major changes in growth patterns and decisions by cities related to their comprehensive plans, areas where not a lot of growth is anticipated that suddenly, for one reason or another, become available for growth, and then the city pursues it. There's a lot of land that shows very little growth in and around the Micron area, for example, because landowners historically haven't been amenable to that. That could change quickly if landowners change their minds. So the market forces related to growth are largely outside of ACHD's control. Market forces are just that, driven by the market. And it's difficult for us to exactly predict how that will go. The best we have
Mhm.
is the demographic data that goes through the Demographic Advisory Committee at Compass. Those growth totals are monitored by ACHD, but ultimately allocated by the cities. ACHD isn't a key contributor there because as a countywide highway district, we look to the cities, the land use planners and others to make those decisions.
Madam President, one thing, other than the Micron expansion, I can't remember in recent years where we've had something land in that was totally unanticipated in terms of a volume of growth. We haven't had a Boeing plant or all the other old, what do I say? Carrots dangled by developers. Oh, we have this big economic development project. We can't tell you what it is, but it's going to be huge. We haven't had anything like that that we've had to react to. To me, Micron is probably the biggest thing last 25 years.
Yeah, Madam President, from an
So-
employment growth perspective,
Yeah.
I think that's a
In
very
a
fair,
short
in a
period
very
of-
short period of time, I
Yeah.
think that's a fair assertion.
Yeah.
There are large retail style projects that can kind of swing things here and there, but certainly those don't generate the type of jobs or the amount
Right.
of volume of jobs that a Micron would.
Okay, I know that Commissioner Pickering is time constrained, so if we can move to the next item and talk through that. I know
Yes.
there's not clear direction on this at this time, but just so that we can get through as much as we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, Madam President, glad to do that. We have options moving forward from today also to work through this. We may need to bring something back on a regular agenda item for the commission to consider. Maybe a motion is needed for some of these discussions, and that's totally fine.
Thank you. So the second policy decision that we'd like to confirm is the topic of expanding the range of project elements that can be impact fee eligible. So this slide shows the various components of a construction project, a CIP project, and how ACHD currently treats them from a policy standpoint in terms of impact fee eligibility. And I'll say again, a large portion of this is driven by the Idaho Development Impact Fee Act and what it outlines as legally able to be impact fee eligible. And then there are some components that have been ACHD policy decisions in the past. At a high level, this rolls up to approximately 66% of the project costs being impact fee eligible. And then the remaining 34% of those project costs need to come from other funding sources, somewhere within the general fund or other components. So the Idaho Development Impact Fee Act does provide clear guidance as to what can or cannot be considered as impact fee eligible. But from our best practice review, we did find that other agencies, including some in Idaho, do assign more components of these projects, more of the project components as impact fee eligible compared to ACHD's current practice. And in particular, through our review, we found that ACHD could include the full costs of pavement reconstruction as part of CIP projects as impact fee eligible. So as an example, you may have a current 2-lane road, and the CIP project says that needs to go to 5 lanes or even just 3 lanes. Current practice, current policy has been to not include the reconstruction of the 2 lanes of capacity that exist today. I think that was that there were many reasons why that was done, but I think it was a conservative way to look at it. In reality, though, when a project goes out and is constructed, those 2 lanes don't remain. Though for right-of-way reasons, for drainage reasons, for meeting current ACHD policy and pavement standards, those lanes are fully reconstructed as part of that widening project. And so we feel there is an opportunity, if it's the commission's desire, to include those costs as impact fee eligible, knowing they're part of our real project costs when you go out and implement it. And so here's what that would look like. I'm sorry, I don't have like the full matrix of the different service areas along with this decision, but in isolation, this is what that decision would look like. So if we were to include those existing travel lanes, it would change our impact fee eligible costs for the full county from 1.49 billion up to 1.58 billion. And so you can see here, it would it would change the impact fee cost for a single family home from $72.68 up to $76.77. And then you can also see the other changes for those other example land uses. I will say, because we've talked about this previously with the commission about including the bike and pedestrian components, we did include that as well. I will let you know that's not our recommendation at this time. And the primary reason is ACHD does already get developers to put that in along the frontage. And we feel if those were to be incorporated as impact fee eligible costs, one of 2 things would happen. Either one, the developer, you would not have developers go out and build them along their frontage when they go in, and therefore a gap would remain, probably longer than it would if the development just did it. And we know that's a challenge. Or you would have to implement some sort of interim policy where the developer would go out and do an interim pathway or something like that, that would then get ripped out and done when the full roadway widening came in. So we think in our review, while it may be possible because it is part of ACHD policy to have those on your roadways, we actually came to the conclusion that the current practice for ped and bike improvements actually is working quite well. So we've kept the costs up here just for your consideration if that's something you do still want to consider. I will say it's not our recommendation at this time to do that, but we would recommend you consider including the existing travel lanes as impact fee eligible and discuss that as a commission and we'll take your direction, obviously, either way that it is.
Yeah.
Commissioner Nielsen.
Yeah, so I guess there's the third option, and it's probably used more in when you have park impact fees, which I'm familiar with. And that is giving the developer a choice to install it and then getting a credit on the impact fee. It's basically putting it in lieu of a fee. So that seems like that would be applicable, and when it goes in, because you still have gaps with the current system, it's not ideal. But it seemed like if you didn't, if they got a credit later on since we've measured what part of the impact fee is ped bike, I don't understand why that couldn't work. Yeah.
Madam President, members of the commission, glad to speak to that. I think it's certainly possible. We typically have when it comes to the use of impact fee credits, those are associated with improvements installed by the developer through an agreement
Yeah.
that we then credit them back. I think in this instance, when it comes to the administrative burden, it would be relatively high to do that for what would be, we would consider a small amount of improvement. And if the developer is willing to install it without going through the credit process as an exaction, you end up with the same outcome, except you don't have to involve the impact fee program. So if it's the commission's goal to have those facilities installed when the development goes in, the best way, at least in staff's opinion, to make that happen is to have the developers install it when those facilities go in and not include it in the impact fee program, because you're getting the sidewalks installed when the development goes in. If you did have a developer who said, well, no, I don't want to install it, and then I'd rather pay the fee for whatever reason they made that choice, then you're left without the facility, and ACHD is collecting this fee that we would then use when we go and build that project, which could be years later in some instances. The amount of facilities we've put in through the development community on most of our major arterial roadways in all parts of our county is hundreds and hundreds of miles of sidewalks and pathways that have been installed essentially by the developers at no cost to ACHD and outside of the impact fee program.
May I ask, and I don't know if what is our reason for our current interpretation of the rule about where the impact fees can be spent with respect to the roadway existing travel lanes?
Yeah, Madam
Is this a legal
President.
thing? Do we need to get our?
No, Madam President, members of the commission, this decision, it's been in our kind of ACHD policy, the breakdown of what's eligible, what's not, for many, many years. I think the initial idea for this back when this was kind of originally anticipated, probably in the late 90s and early 2000s, related to the idea of, well, maybe we can just go in and patch on the necessary improvement, just those extra lanes for more capacity. It's just not how ACHD builds projects, and we've learned over the years that through commission decisions and through the expectations from our projects, there's no patching on a lane just to add more vehicular capacity. We always now are including curb gutter sidewalk, full drainage improvements, ped bike improvements with our projects. This is one way, though, to manage the fee level that some commissions, I think, historically have chosen also by tweaking the level of impact fee eligibility for certain project elements. It is one way to manage the fee level, the cost, because you're essentially taking on more cost as the agency or a higher percentage of the cost versus what goes on to the developer through the impact fee program. So I don't know if this is make or break. I mean, our current policy has it one way. I think you could make an argument either way, but we did want to highlight it as something that was something for the commission to consider. But the facts are this. When we go in and we're doing a roadway widening project, we are removing all of the asphalt, all of the base. We're removing the entire road and replacing the entire road. There is no savings to ACHD for that road that is existing. That's just the facts from a construction perspective. Now, how the commission wants to deal with that in the impact fee program is kind of a different conversation. We believe it's fully eligible. I think our consultants believe that. It's just a matter of should we include it in the cost or not, which is a change from our current calculations.
Sorry, President Gold, I forgot to mention, so the CICAC did review this concept as well. And the full CICAC, it was a unanimous decision that they felt this was something that ACHD should incorporate as impact fee eligible, given the realities as Justin described them. Sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier.
Commissioner Pickering.
Yeah, I've got a skedaddle. I'm in full support of what the CICAC is recommending. And I don't think I had any questions last time that this came up. So I think this makes sense and happy to move forward.
Commissioner Nielsen.
One thing, if I could get afterwards, the PDF is fine, is I'm curious, I know we had the whole roadways to bikeways. Where are our gaps on the arterial network for ped and bike? I would be curious to see where there's so much development's happened. I know you track it. So if I could get that would help me come around to the excluding the ped bike, you know what I mean, for that. And then the second thing on the I do support including the full roadway. Justin, isn't that where we typically get the TMA dollars for maintenance for those full reconstructions? Or, you know what I'm talking about? What do they call
Right.
capital maintenance, or is that a different?
Yeah, Madam
What are
President.
these- How are those typically funded now? Yeah.
Madam President, members of the commission, Commissioner Nielsen. Yeah, in a roadway project, we're not using maintenance dollars. If we're going out and doing a rebuild on an
Rebuild.
existing
Yeah,
roadway,
yeah.
we would certainly potentially use those dollars within the TMA area. But with an expansion project, we don't mix those two funding sources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam President, Commissioner Nelson, the only thing I would add with regards to the bike ped question, and absolutely we can get you where the gaps are. By including that, that would not necessarily expand the list of projects to project locations where there are just gaps.
Yeah.
It would be in connection with the roadway project, and that was not only where, from a practice perspective, but that also was included in the new laws that indicated that we would only install them when we do these widening projects.
Right.
Yes, it would be
Yeah.
ped and bike elements of an existing CIP project that was driven by capacity needs, correct?
Right. Madam President, one other comment, it might be good, I don't know when their next meeting is, or meetings, but I think it would be good to give maybe an explanation, to the ped and bike advisory committees as well. Or if they want to provide input, I don't know, they haven't really come along a CIP process, but just in terms of what the strategies are being considered. I don't want them to think we're against investment. It's just how they're funded. Yeah.
Commissioner Goldthorpe,
I'm in favor of following the CICAC recommendation.
Commissioner McKinney.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, I agree too. So I think you have consensus on the CIC recommendation.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Before we wrap up, just wanted to remind you of next steps. So pending still direction on the service area topic, we will then move forward into compiling all of this into a draft updated CIP and traffic impact fee. The goal for that is to send that out not only directly to our partner agencies for their comments, but also for a general public review once we have that draft. We would obviously come to you with the draft before it's released for public comment. The goal is to do that still yet this summer. August is the goal. And then we would have that public comment period September, October timeframe. And then our goal is to have a pre-adoption and then adoption discussions with you towards the end of the fall in the November timeframe, so that your new fee could be implemented at the beginning of the calendar year 2026.
And Madam President, just to add, obviously, we're still awaiting direction, I think, on one of the key topics. We'll regroup as staff and with the consultant. We heard some maybe requests for information today and things like that. We'll be likely sending out. We have a lot of previous information on this too, and maybe we send that out to the entire commission as a refresher on the service area discussion, just the data points that we discussed. I think for this specific topic, it may be best if we bring something back on the regular agenda and we have the commission provide this direction with a motion and a vote. I think that's probably the best way for us to do it, considering that we need this direction before we're able to. The service area, yes. And that way we can move in that direction. Ultimately, our plans, the CIPs and the ordinances, they have a built-in expiration date. That's how it's designed. And so no pressure, but we're just, this is why staff is attempting to move this conversation forward, knowing that at some point in the future, within that 2026 timeframe, the fee essentially expires and we lose our ability legally to assess the fee. So that's the whole point behind the ordinance and the CIP and what we're all marching towards. So I'm not going to give you a date on when we'll bring that back. I'm sure we'll discuss it with the director and commission president, but that allows time to consider all the things we've discussed today, consider additional information, and we'll bring it back in that format.
Okay. Commissioner Nelson.
My expectation, mine, as if I were doing a comp plan and putting it out for a public hearing, is that I have all of my sources, I have all my footnotes, I have all of the methodology, narrative is complete. So my expectation is we have that whole document at the time we go to public, actually even public comment maybe, so that people understand all of the assumptions, the data that we used. You know, it's not just a table and some maps, but some narrative to the detail warranted so that a year from now we can read it and go, oh yeah, this is how we did it. And when we go to update it, we have that as a starting block. Anyway. So.
Well, thank you, Justin and Sonia and Mark and everybody involved in this process. Really appreciate all your work and your time going through the work session today. So
Oh,
that's all for today and we'll see you next week.
all right.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you,
for your
everybody.
time. Appreciate it.
And can I say,